Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Akizuki, an excellent gunboat in World of Warships at Tier 8. The ship is available in the Gift Event Expedition to the North Pole. Even if you didn't play the game at all in the last couple of updates, you get a Tier 8 ship, and Akazuki is an option for you. And it's very powerful. It is truly an excellent gunboat at its tier. It is limited in a few ways, certainly not the fastest or best maneuvering destroyer, but these guns are excellent. We also have an awesome HP pool here, allowing us to make some mistakes and not be completely out of the game, or take some trades in a gunboat fight, for example, here against a Leningrad. And I will be making some mistakes in this upcoming fight. I mean, no, this is tactical, all right? I planned this ahead of time. This is a very good ship, though, guys. I will say, having 24,000 HP these days with that new flag is really, really good. Tier 8 destroyers often have mid, like, 15,000, 18,000 HP. So you have a lot more than other people. Tactical beaching, okay? Totally planned, all right? I don't want to hear anything else other than that. It was not a mistake. Sarcasm, by the way. Definitely a mistake. Yet it works out in this case because we dodged the torpedoes. Easy. And hopefully finish off this Leningrad. This is a ship, though, that will struggle into carrier games. And unfortunately, I got a lot of those while recording. So you do have to be a little wary if you're thinking about picking up this ship. It's not particularly easy to play, even though it is very strong. I just think that this slow ship with good guns means you need to be very good at positioning your destroyer. There is no room for misplaying and going to the wrong side of the map, getting caught too close to the enemy team. You're gonna die still, even with this very nice HP pool. You notice the extra spotting here that the carrier provides. Not only do we take damage to his bombs, but also someone gets a salvo into us and we take a little bit more damage. So down to 9,000 HP. Not a great start to this match, that's for sure. Carriers are a big problem for any destroyer, any surface ship class, let's be honest, but certainly for destroyers that like to play around concealment. Even an Akazuki, a gunboat, wants to play around its concealment. This ship does have decent enough smokes. They're not American smokes where they last forever, but you do have 4 of them if you're taking Superintendent. So you do have a solid option of smoking up and farming. The reason I'm not doing that here is simple. I'm the one spotting. So if I were to smoke up, then none of these guys would be detected for me to shoot at. So even though that's a good strategy, you do need to be aware of when you're the only person spotting the people in front of you. That's really, really a big deal here. Otherwise, you're going to be just wasting these smoke screens. But let's talk a little more about the actual specs of this ship, right? We have the second best HP at Tier 8 as far as destroyers go, and that's very strong. It also means we have some of the worst detection, but at least at this tier, there's not really that many destroyers that have really bad detection. So I believe we get down to 6.1 kilometer detect with the full build, which is really, really comfortable still. Even into up tiers, that's a solid detection here. Our speed is very slow, though, like I said. 33 knots is like battleship speed. Maybe not at Tier 8, but certainly in things like Iowa, right at Tier 9, we can find ourselves going about that fast as well. Nice torps in on the Lenin. We do have Kagero torps. Only 1 rack, but they are Kagero torps. 10 kilometers, tons of damage. And we have a torpedo reload booster. So every once in a while, we are able to launch 2 racks of these Kagero torps, which is essentially what Kagero gets all the time, by the way. So it's not super lacking in the torpedo power. Still, you have to be careful about Akazuki torps, but it's mostly that gunboat. Unfortunately, yeah, we do have the worst rudder shift at our tier, as well as the second worst turning radius. So eating torpedoes will potentially happen. I certainly have died to torps in my Akazuki more than I can count. This is a ship that does not have a hydro and is not very maneuverable. You'll notice we're also struggling to dodge all of these carrier strikes. Chekalov's a pretty strong carrier, though, certainly, but still, it is tricky to angle or position your ship correctly to avoid every single drop. In this case, just barely snuck past. But yeah, it's tricky when dealing with carriers. Fortunately, he's mispositioned in this case, so we are able to catch up to this carrier and hopefully take him out. DPM, that is what this ship does, right? And it does it very well. 192,000 HE DPM base is really strong. Way better than anything else at your tier. Even better than a lot of tier 9s, some tier 10s even. So this is a very powerful gunboat. We found that Cossack was a really strong gunboat when I was going over the Cossack B there last month for Black Friday ships. And that one had 163,000 HE DPM. So Akazuki, incredibly powerful here. AP is no joke either. You do want to be swapping to the AP. Even though your HE does have improved pen, the AP is still worth going for. 272,000 AP DPM. These are monstrous numbers for a tier 8. It's enough to fit in at tier 9 sometimes even, I would say. And certainly those down tiers where you're facing against some of the tier 6s, tier 7s, it's rough to deal with an Akazuki as a lower tier destroyer, certainly. We do take out the carrier, feels good, and hopefully dodge this last torp. And we do manage it. 4 kills into this one, but their Akazuki managed to survive. So we actually do end up losing this one. A lot of people don't do this, so well played to the enemy Akazuki, but ran off the screen, accepted the victory. Their team had more points. They held the caps for longer in this game, so he didn't have to do anything just to guarantee the victory. A lot of people will just push or get caught, and then they'll lose their team the game. So props to that Akazuki for the awareness to run off the map, even if it did mean we don't get a Kraken or the win, which I would have preferred, certainly. But gotta call out a good play when I see it, of course. Now, this map seems familiar, doesn't it? On to another game where, yes, we're running the full DPM build. Certainly, we could be running a conceal build, a little more focused on hybrid play with the Akazuki, but you can get the range out to 15 kilometers and be running a little bit more DPM upgrades. Double fire in this case. The fire chance is solid on this ship. It does have, I believe it's like 8 fires per minute is the theoretical output of this ship. Very, very solid still. With 30 millimeters of pen on these shells, you don't really need to take IFHE. I know the build, which we'll look at later, does recommend taking IFHE, but really that's only getting you over 32 millimeters of armor as the main threshold that IFHE will help you with. So that's just against battleships at your tier and higher, where you're cutting your fire chance in half, which I think is less useful in my opinion. Most battleships have relatively large superstructures at this tier that you can still get through with your HE. And in this case with Massachusetts, yes, we do have a lot of shatters, but his deck armor would be 38 millimeters, and IFHE would not get us over that threshold anyway. So that wouldn't really be helping us. It'd help us against the upper belt and the bow and the stern, certainly. But the fire chance is something I want, as burning down battleships is very effective, even at tier 8 these days. The AP, while decent alpha damage and DPM, it does lack pen over these longer ranges. It's very small shells. It's 100 millimeter guns. So the 30 mil HE pen, that is sort of a buff that they baked into this line. Back when Akazuki initially released, it couldn't even pen superstructures with its high explosive shells. So they had to buff it in some way. It used to be more of an AP spammer actually, and they changed it so the HE now has this incredible pen, 30 millimeters for 100 millimeter guns. Makes it easier to play, certainly, but the AP still is worth taking, but at 10 kilometers, for example, you only have 43 millimeters of AP pen. So there's quite a few battleships that have that for their upper belt. Certainly some German battleships will see that, the new Pan American battleships. So you got to be a little careful what you go for. Some of the older battleships where you see like North Carolina, for example, we were taking a look at with this event as well. That has 32 mil upper belt, and I got a clip of that at the end where we're seeing that AP do some very good damage when you pen. No improved pen angles on this at all, and it's pretty much the standard 0.01 second fuse times, which is very solid still, but it does mean some of those thinner destroyers will just take over pens. You probably are just shooting HE into Ds anyway. At least that's what I would be recommending here. And I really do think Akizuki is a very good pickup from this gift event. I think this is one of the most disjointed lines that we have in the entire game, and I wonder if Wargaming feels the same, and that's perhaps why a lot of the recent lines that we've been getting, the newer ships, start at tier 8, for example, rather than forcing through some tier 6, 7, maybe even tier 5 ship that doesn't exactly match up with the playstyle of the higher tiers. Akazuki is the beginning of this line where you actually do have some incredible gun power. The tier 5, 6, and 7 are still more torpedo ships rather than the gunboats that this line seems like it would be at higher tier. Akazuki, Kitakaze, as well as the Harugumo are all extremely powerful gunboats. They're all a little bit slow, sluggish, and you got to be a little careful, but they have really solid HP pools as well as this torpedo reload booster. They all play rather similar to one another. And I think that's really good reason to pick up the Akazuki. It allows you to skip over the kind of worst part of the line, in my opinion. I really like the higher tier versions of this line, but I don't enjoy playing the mid and lower tier versions. So if you're looking to get the Harugumo or Kitakaze, being an incredibly powerful tier 9 version of this ship, certainly in ranked, an absolute powerhouse, it's a really tempting offer here to get the Akazuki. Skip your way past a lot of the not so great ships, in my opinion, or less interesting, in my opinion. Again, I'm more of a gunboat player, so it makes sense that I would prefer the later versions of the line. Akazuki's a good option for that. Although North Carolina has a good argument for that too, considering how New Mexico and Colorado are so slow these days and get overmatched everywhere. NC is kind of the start of that higher tier American battleship line as well. So good options all around. Honestly, Wargaming picked some good ships to give away here. Not that I'm a huge fan of giving away ships to people, but I think it makes the matchmaker quite a bit worse to have less experienced players at high tier. But as far as the ships they picked, they're pretty solid examples. In this one, yeah, we've lost this one pretty badly. But we're farming a lot of damage. So that's why I had to include it. This was the build where I sacrificed concealment and really a lot of utility that this ship can bring and cap pressure that it can bring in favor of just maximizing our DPM and our range. Certainly it's hard to lead at these longer ranges, but it's still manageable with some practice, and certainly it helps this battleship is going in a straight line and not maneuvering much. As soon as he starts maneuvering, that's when we start missing, of course. It is tricky, so I would not recommend the full 15-kilometer range build, but you certainly can do it, and at higher tier it can be pretty funny. The passive meta these days does lend itself to this longer range being useful in certain games. I think a lot of the time you want to play this ship and this line as maybe not the frontline destroyer. You sometimes have to, but having this ship as a second line DD, and by that I mean following in, let's say, a Shimakaze, for example, or a Kagero at tier 8 being the equivalent, where that ship has better detection, but quite a bit worse gun power. Let's say you follow that ship in half a kilometer behind him. He spots everything for you, and you just gun down whatever that destroyer is helping spot for you. That's a really powerful tactic you can do, assuming that there's another destroyer on your flank, of course. If you are the only one on your flank, you do have to be a little bit careful. Notice this game I learned from my past mistake there. Full sending it into the cap and then getting caught by that Leningrad, which fortunately worked out by my very skillful ground attempt there. Didn't totally planned. We learned from that and we reversed into the cap instead. Playing a little more cautiously, I do think benefits this ship early on, especially if there are some good torpedo boats on the enemy side. People RPF torp into Akazukis. They're quite slow, so you are liable to be catching those RPF torpedoes. And that HP pool evaporates pretty quick when you eat a torp or two. It is no longer such an advantage because your ship is rather sluggish, as we have talked about. As for those consumables, this torpedo reload booster is quite nice to have, I gotta say. You don't have the best torpedo power, but every once in a while you can launch out a decent spread of torps. If you're saving that for the perfect opportunity, suddenly you're a bit of a Kagero on the flank. So people have to be a little bit wary of pushing into you. The engine boost is a standard 8% engine boost for 120 seconds. So not very special there, but at least we do have that engine boost. If you're trying to do this open water gunboating thing like I've been doing in the end of this game, you do want to save your engine boost for that. That is a great option for it. Also, repositioning around the map sometimes is a great option for that too. But it's very difficult to open water gunboat this ship without having that engine boost available. You saw how much further I wanted to kite back to get a little safer, to start dodging some of those salvos. And even then, it's quite difficult as this ship is large and really is not the most maneuverable thing in the world. There are much better versions of this if you want to open water gunboats. Certainly the French destroyers there, the Kleber line, Russian DDs even can be quite good at that as well. Being so slow means everyone can hit you rather easily. Now, I will include a few examples of just getting locked out of games, because I do want to caution you on this ship, at least right now. I think the matchmaker will improve as the Christmas update goes on, or perhaps into next year. Maybe things will get better, but Tier 8 is a little tough. I think Tier 8 and Tier 9 have the worst matchmaker these days. These two tiers can see the most number of carriers as well as submarines. So Tier 8 here, we have a double carrier game. No subs, fortunately, but when those two carriers decide to keep going after you, it's not a very fun experience. Shocker, right? But I didn't have a great time this match, and there were several others like this. Unfortunately, Wargaming really hasn't done anything to improve the playability of World of Warships while having carriers in this game. And we're just gonna hard cut that there. I'm not even gonna try and have a graceful edit through that voice line. We're just not gonna get into it again. You've already heard it, I'm sure, plenty from me and others. Maybe I should give you some advice for dealing with these carriers or trying to play around it as an Akazuki or a destroyer. Number one is turning off your AA. That is huge. And in the initial clip of this game, at least where we started, I had my AA still turned on, which was a misplay. Got me spotted, and therefore the carrier went for me. So easy way to avoid being detected is to turn your AA off. That means that I have a 2.9 kilometer AA detection range rather than the 5.8 kilometers that my AA can actually reach. As soon as my AA fires at a plane, I'm going to be spotted. So that's an easy thing you can do. Whilst I'm fighting someone and I'm spotted anyway, I want to leave the AA on, because then the carrier already knows where I am, so he's going to come in and strike me anyway. So I may as well try and get a little bit of damage in. So managing when to turn your AA on and off is really important for mitigating some of that incoming damage. Notice we're spotted here, so we're getting shot at over an island. Carrier spotting, it hurts. So you do want to limit the amount of time that that carrier is possibly spotting you. These smokes, I do maybe greedily save too much for that perfect opportunity to smoke up and farm. So a good option is to use your smokes to get undetected from a carrier. That is not a waste of a smoke. As much as I want to greed out these smokes and use them for that perfect situation where someone's spotting for me, you really should use them to get away from carrier spotting and save yourself a lot of HP for the late game. Much like I talk about cruisers being more powerful late game when they have a lot of HP, similar with destroyers. You can even start to go after some of those cruisers if you have enough HP, and maybe they're low. The DPM on Akazuki certainly is enough to do some very, very good damage into those cruisers. So saving that HP, not being spotted, is key. If Wargaming decides to, they could just overnight remove carrier spotting. It could just become minimap only. I don't know why they haven't done that. I'm starting onto the rant again. Uh-oh. Okay, we died. Let's move on. Let's move on to another match. Yeah, 31 planes there. Who did they go after? This guy. They'll sometimes lock on to you as a destroyer player. I won't do the whole streamer guy or YouTube guy gets more focus, but I think that could be a part of it too. But a lot of carriers still just want to go after destroyers as they have such massive battle impact. DDs win you games. They will do consistent scouting. The carrier might not always have planes on your flank. Therefore, the destroyer will always be on your flank, assuming they're alive. Be great for scouting, finding those enemy destroyers, killing them. So carrier players will want to go after those DDs to hopefully help their team win. It is a normal thing to do. And you do have to be a little bit careful of that. Here, I should have smoked way sooner. This is what I'm talking about here. Trying to greed out these smokes. There's no one in range for me to farm, so I don't want to smoke. But his planes, he still has more planes, and the Chumphon is farming us a little bit. Our last known position here is in this smoke, so I speed up and leave my smoke. Because carrier players will also blind drop you. Maybe this hasn't happened to you as much, but I see this all the time. They will be blind dropping me in smoke, whether or not it's the last known position like that when I'm slowing down in my smoke, or it's I'm shooting out of my smoke and they try and blind fire it. So you do want to be maneuvering around in your smokes as well, and be willing to leave them potentially if you know that blind drop is coming in. They often will not be leading for you to leave your smoke. They assume you want to stay in your smoke, farm out of it, for example, or just not be detected. That's part of that whole greeting for the smokes that sometimes you just got to give up. You just have to use them as a consumable to stay alive, and I need to do a better job at that. And I do want to point that out as something you could be doing in your games yourself. This one also is not going to go so well for us. I lost so many games, guys. There's so many blowouts this patch. I'm sure you've been feeling it as well. Don't worry. It's not like just because I'm positive in these videos doesn't mean in the moment that loss, after blowout, after not close game, after not close game. It gets to me too, guys, all right? I can't play this game for very extended periods of time, okay? That's how I manage it. Play 1-2 hours, and then I'm good for a bit, right? And then I kind of go do something else, I suppose. These post commentaries, I'm out of that suffering, so it's a lot easier for me to talk more positively, I suppose. And that's what I want to do. I don't want to be creating content for a game and being super negative about it. I do like this game a lot still, even though there are problems that I do want to and will continue to call out. At the end of the day, it is a game that I still enjoy very, very much. North Carolina does not have fires on him anymore. Notice our fire chance there has been pretty good into these battleships. As soon as we get a fire or two, then I'm going to swap over to that armor piercing. And into NC here, especially at this range, it will be pretty good. Actually, he's going to angle to us, so maybe we stay to the HE a little bit more. NC's got floaty shells, but we're not the fastest DD, so he still does hit us anyway. We missed our torpedoes, unfortunately, because only one rack of torps there. It's hard to lead that and have a wide spread to catch someone's maneuvering, I suppose. He's turning away from us and going broadside. And this is where you want to be shooting AEP, at least once we get the double fire. I'm greedy for those fires, man. What can I say? But the AP is good enough at this range and at this angle. And look at his ship. See how it's kind of darkened, like soot is on his superstructure? That means it's been saturated, so we're not going to get as much damage out of that. Notice how his bow is nice and clean still? That's where we're going to get the most damage. As soon as something is saturated, it's just going to take reduced damage to that section. And as soon as we do big hits there, suddenly it starts to darken, have that soot color. Aiming for that is really, really strong, assuming you can pen those sections. I'm going to do that in cruisers as well. Aim for sections that aren't saturated. That's a good strategy to run if you can pen those sections that haven't been saturated yet. And with that, I think I've pretty much covered all of the gameplay, or at least the clips I could gather that were relevant to a video. Certainly had many blowouts with not great results. I do want to say that. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, even though I do want to pull together the best bits, because this is a strong ship. I do want to show you that it's a powerful ship. But I also don't want to mislead you into thinking that every match is going to be great or something like that. But it is important, I think, to see the best of what a ship can offer. So with this one, the build can look a little bit different depending on if you want to go for this full send damage build. I wouldn't recommend this, but if you want to try it for fun, you can. I think having the concealment is very important. I think farming from your smoke is a safer way, so running Fearless Brawler doesn't make as much sense. It does give us a nice reload buff, I won't lie. But this is a little bit too greedy in my opinion as far as the build goes. So for me, I'd prefer something a little more like this, right? Giving up range, giving up Fearless Brawler for concealment, as well as just grabbing some more normal skill points, I suppose, buffing our fire chance since we have such high DPM, so many shells being fired that buffing that fire chance is very good. 7% fire chance on so many shells at once is very, very powerful. Running things like Superintendent, Survivability Expert for that extra HP and another heal. or sorry, not a heal, a smoke. I meant to say smoke. But a smoke in this case can be a bit of a lifeline. I've tried to talk about that in this video a lot to almost get it drilled into my head as well, because I do need to use these smokes more aggressively. I'm taking Superintendent for this purpose. Aggressively use those smokes so I don't take as much damage early. Like, I'm trying to train myself as well, but also tell you guys, because it is a good way to avoid damage that this ship can be taking early on. Upgrades always looked like this for me. Concealment, of course. 6.1 is very solid for such insane gun power at a tier 8. Propulsion mod, we're still very sluggish, but we do need this, especially when we're playing in smokes. I've been torped out in an Akazuki quite a lot in my smokes, and even with propulsion mod, you're still very, very sluggish, so you definitely want to take that. And I think the rest is relatively standard. This new flag, very helpful. Of course, no detonations now, which is lovely. But the extra HP you can get, man. Some of these DDs get pretty tanky now. I do like to see that. Makes it a little bit easier to play. These torpedoes I don't think are worth buffing, but they are nice to have. Certainly, having that high damage, 10 kilometers of range, very nice. And a reload booster allowing you to dump out 2 racks of torpedoes at once, a bit like a Kigero at your tier, but with better gun power. I do like having that option, I will say. So Akazuki is honestly an excellent option for this journey or expedition to the North Pole gift event. I really like it. For tier 8, it as well as the North Carolina are my 2 picks. I prefer Battleship, of course, a little biased there, certainly. But Akazuki is a strong contender, and I do like that you skip over the worst parts of the line, in my opinion. It's not a very cohesive line, so skipping past that is kind of nice, I will say, if you are someone who is interested in the Hiragamo, the Kitakaze, for example. Very strong ships. Akazuki at its own tier, very, very powerful too. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.